When we speak of war, we often imagine it in the clash of armies, the roar of artillery, and the ruin of cities. But the heart of war lies not in its noise, but in the silence it leaves behind, the silence of empty homes, of families broken, of futures interrupted. What we see in Ukraine today is not only a struggle of territory, but of conscience, of human dignity, and of the meaning of peace itself. It is easy for leaders and statesmen to speak of deals and agreements. These are words forged in the chambers of diplomacy, pressed into the language of strategy. Yet a true peace cannot be bartered like grain at a market stall. It is not a bargain struck between exhausted men, but a recognition of something deeper, that the lives entrusted to us are not pawns on a board, but souls with eternal weight. To suggest that peace lies simply in yielding, or that strength is only found in conquest, is to misunderstand both. A peace born of surrender may quiet the battlefield for a season, but it leaves the seeds of bitterness buried in the soil, waiting to grow again. Real peace is not the absence of war, it is the presence of justice. It comes when nations, even in their power, restrain themselves for the sake of mercy, and when the weak hold fast to the truth that their cause is not erased by the loudness of the strong. Ukraine's suffering is not a story confined to one corner of Europe. It is a reminder that evil does not rest when good men grow weary, that freedom must be guarded not only with weapons, but with resolve, prayer, and the conviction that right and wrong are not negotiable matters. The call to make a deal sounds pragmatic, even wise to ears tired of conflict. But if the deal demands the soul of a nation, it is no peace. It is merely a pause before a deeper darkness. Better is the long road of endurance than the short path of betrayal. The question before the world is not merely how to end this war, but how to end it in a way that honors truth, protects the innocent, and refuses to cloak injustice with the polite name of compromise. For the measure of a people is not only how they fight, but how they stand when pressed to lay down what is most precious. True peace is not the absence of war, but the presence of justice. Too often in the course of history men have mistaken quiet for peace, believing that the stillness after surrender is the same as harmony. Yet silence can be deceptive. A land may be stripped of its voice, its people made weary enough to yield, and still the deep unrest of injustice festers beneath the surface. Peace that is built on fear or forced submission is like a thin layer of ice over a raging river. It may appear calm, but beneath it the waters are still violent, waiting for their moment to break free. Justice, on the other hand, is the foundation that allows peace to endure. It does not silence wrongs by burying them, but confronts them so they cannot rise again. Justice listens to the cries of the oppressed, lifts up the broken, and restrains the hand of those who would crush others for gain. Without it, what the world calls peace is merely a pause between battles, a fragile truce with no true healing. In every age, the temptation has been to settle for the easier path, to accept any agreement that spares us the discomfort of conflict. But to do so is to confuse comfort with righteousness. A people who long for peace must first long for justice, for without it, even treaties and deals will crumble like sand in the tide. The lasting strength of a nation, and indeed the dignity of humanity itself, rests on this truth, that peace cannot be bought at the expense of what is right. Only when justice reigns does peace take root, growing into something that outlives war, stronger than weapons, and unshaken by the storms of time. A deal that costs a nation its soul is no peace at all. Throughout history, there have been countless moments when leaders have been tempted to exchange principle for the promise of calm, to lay down what is right in order to silence the noise of conflict. At first, such bargains appear wise, for they offer respite to the weary and a fragile sense of stability to the fearful. Yet beneath the surface lies a grave danger. When a nation surrenders the essence of its dignity, its freedom, and its truth, it loses far more than territory or wealth. It loses the very foundation upon which its future must stand. A soul once sold is not easily regained, and the cost of compromise with injustice is always higher than the price of resistance. What is offered in return for such surrender is never true peace, but only a counterfeit version of it, a quietness that masks the erosion of honor and the weakening of resolve. For peace that demands the abandonment of one's deepest convictions is nothing more than submission in disguise, a fragile truce built on the terms of the oppressor. The soul of a nation is found in its people, their courage, their memory, their willingness to defend what is sacred. When that soul is preserved, even in hardship, hope survives and the possibility of a just peace remains. But when it is traded away for promises that will never last, the very identity of the nation is at stake. The world may look upon such agreements with applause, praising them as practical solutions, yet history has shown again and again that false peace unravels quickly, and the wound left behind is deeper than before. A nation that values its soul above all else understands that no temporary safety, no fleeting applause, is worth the cost of its integrity. War tests not only armies, but the conscience of humanity. The battlefield may be where the clash of weapons is heard, but the greater struggle takes place within the human spirit, where questions of right and wrong, courage and fear, mercy and cruelty are weighed. Armies march under banners, but behind those banners are choices made by men and women who must decide what they are willing to defend and how far they are willing to go in pursuit of victory. War strips away illusions and reveals the true character of nations and individuals alike. It exposes whether leaders fight for justice or for power, whether soldiers act with honor or with brutality, whether people cling to truth or are willing to trade it for survival. The conscience of humanity is pressed in times of conflict because war forces a reckoning with values that are easy to speak of in peace but difficult to uphold under fire. To stand for justice when it costs nothing is simple, but to hold fast to it when cities burn and lives are torn apart requires a resolve that cannot be feigned. In the crucible of war, morality is not an abstract idea, but a living force that determines whether human dignity is preserved or destroyed. Even in the darkest hours of battle, the treatment of the innocent, the weak, and the defeated becomes a measure of the moral compass guiding the strong. The test of war, then, is not simply who holds the field when the fighting is done, but who has managed to keep their humanity intact while the world demanded its surrender. It is in such times that nations write their legacy, not only with ink on treaties, but with the witness of their actions and the memory of how they bore the weight of conscience when the cost was greatest. Endurance, in truth, is greater than surrender for comfort. In every struggle there comes a moment when the temptation to yield appears as the easier road, when the weariness of hardship whispers that compromise will bring relief. Yet the kind of comfort that is purchased by abandoning truth is short-lived, for it rests on a foundation too fragile to withstand the test of time. Endurance, though it demands patience, sacrifice, and often great suffering, carries with it a strength that grows deeper the longer it is exercised. A people who endure in truth may face trials, but they do not lose themselves, and in that perseverance they discover a resilience that outlasts every storm. Comfort gained through surrender can numb pain for a season, but it cannot protect the heart from the quiet corrosion of regret. Those who give up truth for ease wake to find that what they preserved was only an illusion, while what they lost was the very core of their identity. Endurance, on the other hand, builds character and fortifies hope, because it rests upon what is eternal rather than what is temporary. When truth is held firmly, even under pressure, it becomes a light that cannot be extinguished by shadows, guiding not only those who endure but also those who look to them for courage. History remembers not the ones who laid down their convictions to escape discomfort, but those who stood unshaken, willing to bear the cost of faithfulness. To endure in truth is to choose a harder path, yet it is the only path that leads to honor, dignity, and a peace that cannot be stolen. Comfort fades, but the strength born of endurance leaves a mark upon generations, reminding all who follow that the worth of truth far surpasses the ease of surrender. Compromise with injustice plants the seeds of future conflict. Whenever wrong is tolerated under the name of peace, it does not vanish but rather takes root, silently growing until it bursts forth again with greater force. Injustice is never satisfied with a small victory. It feeds upon every concession, stretching its reach further with each step that is yielded to it. To compromise with it may bring a temporary pause in open strife, but beneath that fragile quiet, resentment brews, wounds deepen, and bitterness becomes an inheritance passed down to those who follow. History shows countless examples where unjust agreements, signed in haste or fear, only postponed the inevitable reckoning, ensuring that the suffering to come would be greater than what might have been borne in the present. A false peace born of such compromise is like a structure built upon sand. It may stand for a moment, but the storms of truth and time will topple it without mercy. True stability can never be established when the foundation is corrupted by betrayal, oppression, or deceit. For a nation, or for humanity as a whole, the refusal to confront injustice is not neutrality but participation. For silence and acquiescence lend strength to the very forces that ought to be restrained. The path of compromise may be praised as pragmatic, as a way to move forward without further pain, yet the harvest it produces is one of renewed strife and deeper wounds. To resist injustice, though costly, protects not only the present generation but those yet unborn, sparing them from inheriting the chains of a peace that was never real. Compromise with what is evil guarantees that conflict will return, sharper and more devastating, for the moral order cannot be mocked forever. What is sown in dishonesty and oppression will always grow into division, rebellion, and unrest, and the world will be forced to reap what it once refused to uproot.